So, dressing for your height, what does that even mean? I did a poll here on YouTube, and this is what you guys said. And as you can see here, tons of good responses, and maybe a few not so good responses. Simply put though, does it mean short men can't wear baggy clothing? Does it mean tall, big guys shouldn't go for a close fit? Well, believe it or not, gents, the secret to dressing your height has been around since 2500 BC. Yeah, this mathematical formula was used to construct the pyramids. It was also used in 500 BC to construct the Parthenon. What I'm talking about here is the golden ratio. The golden ratio is defined as A plus B is to A as A is to B. Now, what's really cool about this ratio, besides the fact it's been used by engineers, artists, and architects for thousands of years, is that it naturally appears in nature. And even if you're not familiar with the term, the golden rectangle is seen all over the place. This rectangle, using the Fibonacci sequence, represents where each number is the sum of the two preceding ones. And this right here, the golden spiral, is seen in circular arcs on some of the most famous buildings in the world. Not to mention, of course, it also pops up in nature and other natural settings. So how does all this relate to you dressing for your height? Well, gents, because timeless style is all about you leveraging proportions to look your best. And in today's video, gents, I'm going to share with you how. So to start things off, gents, I'm going to share with you the 5 rules of proportion so that you can properly dress for your height and not look like this, or this, or this. Seriously, I think we can agree we don't want you looking like any of those guys. Now, gents, before I get into those details, I want to introduce you to today's sponsor, Peter Manning. Gents, if you're a not-so-tall guy and you want quality clothing that's incredibly stylish, you are going to love what Peter Manning has to offer. Seriously, there's 40 million men in the United States alone that are 5'9" or shorter. And guess what? Peter Manning is made specifically for you. I've been to their New York store. I've met the founders. These are guys that dealt with this problem every single day. So they created a whole company back in 2013. Based out of New York City, these guys wanted a place where men who were not so tall could go and find stylish, well-made clothing that was made specifically for them. This sweater right here with the shawl neck, whether you love it or you hate it, here's the deal, is for a lot of smaller guys, they are, they go in, their selection just isn't that great. They can find anything that fits them. They're happy. When you go into Peter Manning, everything is going to be made to fit you. Whether you're 5'2", whether you're 5'6", you're going to find that this is made specifically for men who are, not so tall, well under 5'9". Everything is made for you. And when it comes to the style, when it comes to options, that's why I love Peter Manning so much, because you go in there and everything is classic in style. Yeah, they're going to have a little bit of fun with some fashion-forward items, but most items right there on their shelves, these are things that you can spend the money on and you can wear season after season. And guys, I want to stress quality, because that's something, yeah, you could maybe find something that fits you in the boys department, but it's made of a cheap material. Peter Manning, all of their materials, all their craftsmanship, everything here, they pay attention to the way the buttons are sewn on, to the materials that they're using in the fabrics. Everything right here is really high quality, so you know it's going to last. And gents, to encourage you to take action ASAP, check out the link in the description of today's video. There is a deal that's not going to be around forever. Use that link, go over to Peter Manning, see how much you can save, and go over their awesome company. Even get on their emailing list, check them out, bookmark them, especially if you are a not so tall guy. In any case, gents, Peter Manning, when it comes to dressing for the shorter man, they've got some of the best selection and best clothing you're going to find on the web. All right, gentlemen, so let's get into the 5 rules of dressing for your height. First up, are you considered tall or short? Now, a lot of you guys have an idea in your head, but I'm going to go ahead and define it. If you're over 6 foot in the United States, you are considered tall. If you're 5'6" or below, you are considered short. Again, this is an American standard here, and I'm talking specifically for clothing. You could be 5'2" with tons of confidence and think you're the biggest guy in the world. That's cool. I'm all for that. But that's not going to change the reality that a lot of clothing is just not made for you, and that's what I want to address. You see, about 150 years ago, things changed when it came to clothing. It used to be that everyone's families made their own clothing. You either made it yourself, you had somebody making it for you, but it was pretty much custom because it had to be. The whole mass manufacturing of clothing didn't really exist. Fast forward to today, very few of you guys are having custom pieces made. And because of that, you're going to find that a lot of these mass manufacturers, especially to keep the price low, they're going to keep it relatively uniform when it comes to the sizing of their collars, of their cuffs, and of the proportions in general of the pieces they're building. Now, this isn't a bad thing if you are model size. So if you're 5'8", you're 5'11", guess what? Most clothing off the rack proportionally is made for you. That being said, if you fall out of that range, you're 5'3", you are 6'3", you're going to find a lot of clothing proportionally isn't going to look right. There's going to be something off. That big guy that puts on that shirt that fits him, but all of a sudden you look at the size of that collar, it just feels too small. And what happens when you have a collar, you have a piece that's proportioned wrong, especially next to your face, it just looks off. Sometimes people can't put their finger on it, but they can feel it, and it isn't something that's going to be great overall for your look. So what to do about this? Well, first up, just simply being aware of the problem. You're going to be ahead of the majority of people. The reality is most people don't even see it because they're not even aware it's an issue. So the fact that you are aware of this, all of a sudden you can be on the lookout for clothing that actually is going to be proportional to your build, to your size, to your height. Now, being aware of this, you start to look for options. Today's sponsor, Peter Manning, like I talked about, they're geared towards smaller guys. But all of a sudden, maybe you're 6'5". Hey, you start finding stores, you find brands that are actually built for you. And to be honest, this is one of the best things I think a man can do. He starts to focus in on the fit for his body type, not what the store is telling you should fit you. You know what your measurements are, you know what your build is, and I know it may fluctuate and change when it comes to weight, but height isn't really going to change too much, and you'll find that if you can find a brand that works for your particular height, your build, all of a sudden you're going to have, that's half the war right there. Now, I will straight up admit, this takes time, it takes a bit of research, but being able to do this, find the brands that work for you is a big step. Another option though is to go custom. As a guy that used to own a custom clothier, I'll tell you that our best clients were people that were hard to fit, were really tall or really short, or had something about their build that it needed that custom design, especially for suits or trousers. Shirts, I think actually you can get relatively close and you can have those actually tailored to fit you. All that being said, there are a couple issues besides the price of custom clothing, especially if you're on Savile Row, incredibly high price, lower prices when you go maybe to East Asia, if you're going to be in Bangkok, if you're going to be in Hong Kong, or you work with a traveling tailor. But there's also a risk to that, is that does the person understand design and proportions? Because you can get something that fits you, but they could still go with a standard size collar. And so you kind of, you get the fit right, but the proportions are still off. And that's what this video is about, understanding the importance of those collar sizes and those cuff sizes, and even the placement of the buttons. Now, for this next rule with proportion and dressing for your height, I want to highlight two athletes. Now, the first one, Michael Phelps, for most Americans, needs no introduction. This guy has won more gold medals than any athlete ever in the Olympics. The second athlete, though, Hicham El Guerrero, is less known in the United States unless you're a middle distance runner. That being said, the Moroccan runner is very well known in his own country and has 2 Olympic medals to his name, including the world record in the mile. Now, Phelps is 6'4". El Guerrero is 5'9". Yet despite that 7-inch difference in height, if they were to go shopping for a pair of Levi's, guess what? They would buy the same exact size. Their inseam is the same. How is this possible? Gentlemen, this brings up the next 2 points that you've got to pay attention to when dressing for your height, is the proportions of your torso and the proportions of your limbs. As any hipster will tell you, we are all unique snowflakes. Seriously, no two human beings are alike. And even though you may be tall, you may be short, you may be average in height, your torso may be a bit longer, maybe a bit shorter. Your legs could be longer. Your arms may be shorter. And all of this, gentlemen, goes into play when you're trying to find items that fit you well and proportionally will look good on you. So let's start with the torso. Now, this is going to be related to your overall height. But if you're a relatively shorter person, in general, you're going to find that your torso is going to take up a higher ratio than your legs or your arms. The opposite is true for a really tall guy. Your torso, in proportion to your legs and arms, is going to be smaller. Now, a lot of people go through their entire lives not even noticing this. And as long as it's not at an extreme, most clothing is going to cover it up and it's not a big deal. Where you need to be careful is when you wear clothing that emphasizes your longer torso or your shorter torso, because you want to go towards wearing clothing that brings you into the average. Remember, the golden ratio. Now, before I go any further, this begs the question, why are we going again for this golden ratio? What is so attractive about it? Because it is average. And what is average in a society in general is what people are attracted to. I remember reading a study years ago, I think coming out of the University of California, Santa Barbara, and they talked about how as human beings, we are drawn to what is the norm in our society. So this is where it's interesting because you could be over in Japan, you could be over in Gibraltar, you could be, I don't know, down in South America and Brazil. And the average there is actually going to shift, is going to change. As such, what is attractive can actually shift in a society over time or as you change from one country to another. Not to get sidetracked, but here in the United States, the obesity epidemic. I will say that it's become normalized and a lot of people they don't see an issue when it comes to attraction. I know a lot of you guys do, but I will say that in general, we're more accepting of it. Bad, good, you can let me know your thoughts in the comments. My point, unless you're going for shock value, unless that is your goal, be careful about going towards an extreme because for many people, it won't be attractive. Now, what about limb length? So similar to the torso, if you are a taller guy, in general, your limbs are going to be longer. Not always the case. And if you're a shorter guy, your limbs are going to be shorter. The key here is understanding that you do have slightly shorter legs or longer legs because you want to be looking for clothing that has enough material or is cut in a way. Because let's talk about, the biggest issue I think for really small guys is finding trousers that don't have a crotch cut that goes halfway down to almost their knees. And things aren't that much easier for tall guys. They put on a pair of pants, it looks like they're wearing a pair of high waters. All of a sudden, they look like jorts. Again, custom is an option here, especially if you're at an extreme, or find a brand, find a store that works for you, that caters to your build, to your body type, because they're going to get not only the length right, but also the proportions. If there's going to be a pocket on the side, it's not going to look too small. If you're a really big guy, it's not going to look too big if you are a smaller guy. The next two rules on proportion, I'm going to throw them together because they are very closely related. That's going to be shoulder width, you've got to nail it, and your head size. All right, Jen, so get your head out of the gutter. The head we are talking about is this one right here. And you can't do much for the size of that head. But understand, if you are smaller, in general, your head is going to take up a larger proportion of your overall body than if you are taller. That's why from a distance, we can tell if a guy is a giant or we can tell if he is a bit shorter. The head, in proportion to the overall body size, gives us a very quick indicator of the overall height and size of a man. Head size also plays into how people perceive and are going to approach a person. Because the thing is, if you look at a baby, babies are born with heads that, compared to the rest of their body, are very disproportionately large. As human beings, we have evolved to find large heads on smaller bodies to be very cute. Now, this is great if you're a kid. Not so great if you are in your 40s and you're 5'2" and your head, in proportion, your body just happens to be larger. And let's not leave off the tall guys. If you're 6'6", your head, in proportion to your body, is going to be tiny. So people see you and you look lanky. You look like a giant. You can look very intimidating and people can step to the other side of the street. You just look scary. So obviously we can't change the size of your head, but we can change the perception of it. So understand that your grooming habits, actually your choice of hairstyle, can affect the appearance of the size of your head. Going for a hairstyle that's closer to the sides all of a sudden is going to thin up the head. Maybe you grow out a longer hairstyle, or you could even bring in a piece of headwear that again balances out the head, makes it look a little bit larger. And by the way, the perfect ratio of shoulder to waist is going to be 1.618. Again, the golden ratio popping up, but the reality is 90 some odd % of men do not fall into that ratio. So you want to, most cases, build up the shoulder. In some cases, you'll want to narrow it down. But if you're going to build up the shoulders, what does that do to the perception of the head? It makes the head, in general, look smaller. So for a lot of shorter men, a lot of men with that larger head, and in proportion to their body, building up shoulders by wearing a jacket, having a shirt with epaulets, or even with a shirt with a little bit of structure, maybe avoiding a raglan sleeve versus going with one with more of a pointed sleeve. That right there is going to give your shoulders shape and overall balance out the size of your head. For really big guys, somebody that spends a lot of time in the gym, you may think, yeah, the cartoon character He-Man looked good, but if you look like this in real person, you look really odd. You almost become a centerpiece. You look as all brawn and no brains, a beefcake. You don't want that. Or maybe you do, but in any case, controlling your message and understanding that if you've got this type of build where you've got the really broad shoulders, you can de-emphasize them a bit by going with shirts with raglan sleeves, or maybe even going with a jacket if you're going to be wearing a sports jacket with no shoulder padding. It's going to be very soft on the shoulders and roll over. Again, gents, I want to emphasize there's not a wrong or right here. There's simply, do you have awareness of this, and can you use this tool to be able to craft the message you want to send with the clothing that you wear? So, what video to watch next? Well, gents, I've got you covered with this one. Boom, right here. Check it out. Solid video. I know you're going to love it. Seriously, guys. Good video. Boom, click it. Magically, you will go to the next video, and I will no longer have to hold this up. Come on, it's getting heavy. Click. Come on.